everyone. Thanks for being here. We'll keep this really interactive and actionable because, as Ashley just stated a second ago, I really am passionate about helping teachers to teach well without adding more to their plate. So everything that we're going to go over here, all 10 strategies are designed to be no prep. They're more like tools that you can pull out of your back pocket at a moment's notice. Really versatile, no grading involved. It really is about getting our students to engage with the vocabulary by actually using it and talking about it, maybe even arguing about it a little bit in a good way, in a good academic way. So that's the goal here for you. And then I have several examples to show you of what some of these strategies and games can look like. So you'll probably feel really compelled to grab screenshots and make sure you don't miss anything. But like Ashley mentioned, we are going to send you all of this. So really just focus on the information and, get the creative wheels turning in your head so that you can think about literally which one could you walk into your classroom tomorrow morning and just start implementing with no prep ahead of time. So, okay, in the chat, if you can find the chat there, approximately how many vocabulary words do you think you're at this point in the school year? So I don't know if you have a really formal vocabulary curriculum you have to follow, like, oh, we have 10 words every week that we have to do. Because if so, if you started school in September and you've been doing 10 vocabulary words every week up until now, you've got, 120, 130 words so far. That's a lot. Now, if you don't have anything formal like that, you might think about all of the, the articles, the passages, the short stories, the novels, all the things that you and your students have been experiencing in the classroom, and all the vocabulary that's probably just come together at that point. If you're halfway through the year or 4 or 5 months into the school year, it's you probably have at least 50 or 60 or 100, maybe more vocabulary words. So that's kind of what we're going into all these strategies with. So, Ashley, I don't know if there are any comments in the chat about that. I know depending on which device people are on, sometimes the chat is really easy to find, sometimes it's not. But at least 50, probably more than that, especially if you consider the academic side of vocabulary words like convey and infer and just all those genre specific words. It's a lot of words. And so the 10 strategies I'm about to show you lend themselves really well to this point in the school year where these words are starting to build. Your students have been exposed to a lot of vocabulary, and it can feel frustrating when it's okay, I feel like they don't remember anything. These strategies are going to help them retain and consistently go back. And these 10 strategies can also be used all throughout the year. You could use them every week. I'm not saying use all 10 every week, but you could definitely pick 1 or 2 of the 10 strategies to use every single week so that students are constantly using these words and so that you don't have to actually grade their practice with it. Okay. Actually, I do see some information in the chat that's helpful. Yeah, 50 words, maybe around 200. Reviewing high frequency words. Yes. Okay. So these are all good things. All right, I'm going to flip the camera around and share my screen so that I can show you right off the bat what the 10 strategies are called, and then we'll just go through each of them one at a time. But what I want you to do is really think about how these strategies could work in your classroom. Which one could you walk in tomorrow and use? Knowing that your students in a lot of these strategies, they can pull from all the words you've done the entire school year. That makes it really fun. Okay, so share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? I want to go to presentation mode so you see everything. Okay. All right. Are we good? Just to make sure you can see 10 ways to embed vocabulary, especially if you have no time in your classroom. That no time means I don't have time to find anything. I don't have time to create anything. I don't have time to grade anything, but they do need to practice and engage with their vocabulary, right? So that's what we're doing here. That's what the no time piece means. It's no time for you to gather things and find things and grade things, much less the time it takes. Some of these strategies can be as short as 5 or 10 minutes, and some you could spend a whole class period on. So they're very flexible and versatile. All right. So the first 5 that we're going to look at, these are the names. This is what they're called. Chain reaction, name it, silly sentences, personification, get the gist, and then we've got strategies 6 through 10. Charades, telestrations, sentence scoot, parts of speech, and even poetry, which is really creative. So we're going to go ahead and just get started. So strategy number one is what we call chain reaction. The more words, the better. This is one to use right now in the school year. You can use it all throughout, going to the end of the school year. It doesn't work so well if you're like in the beginning of the school year because it really lends itself to a bunch of vocabulary. This is great if you want your students to go back and take a look again at some of the words they learned a few months ago. So what it is students create a vocabulary word chain. You put the students into small groups, okay? And so either they can choose a word to start with, or you can just give them a word to start with. Each group could have the same word, and then you can see all the different reactions that come from that. It can be fun to give each small group in your classroom the same vocabulary word, and they're going to create the chain, and then to see the direction everybody goes in, or you can give each group a different word. It doesn't matter, but they start with one word. The last letter of that vocabulary word becomes the first letter of the next vocabulary word. So it's a chain. So they can do this on paper, they can do it digitally, but it's literally just a chain. And the whole point is that it gets your students looking at all of their vocabulary words, right? So, oh, okay, loquacious. Loquacious ends with an S. So I need an S vocabulary word. And they start looking through their words, looking for something that starts with the letter S. And as their chain grows, you can time them. You can see, okay, I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes. And at the end of the 6 minutes, we're going to see which groups have, which group has the longest chain, right? And so what happens is your students will start to think about, well, wait, does it count if I add, an S to the end of this word? Because I have an S word here and my word right here doesn't end with an S. So can I add an S? I don't know. Can you? Is that a real word? Oh, I want to use this vocabulary word. It starts with a G. Can I add ing to the word before it so that they match up? Well, if you add ing, is that a real word or are we just making up words now? So see where I'm going with this? You start to not only get your students inadvertently reviewing some of their older vocabulary words, but you also give your students an in the moment, real-time, authentic way to start thinking about prefixes and suffixes and what you can do with words, how you can change a noun into, an adjective or whatever. Some words you can, some words you can't. And so it's just a very authentic way to get students thinking about how words function in sentences. So that's chain reaction. And that's just one method of chain reaction where you, explain to students what they're going to do, and then you set a timer and you can see how long their chains are. And or are there any words in the chain that aren't actually words, like you just slapped a suffix to the end of it and that's not even a real word, or oh, we weren't sure if we could add tion to this word because we needed the N for the next word, but we looked it up and it's a real word. And so there you have students excited about vocabulary and discovering new things for themselves. So that's a really fun one. Okay, chain reaction. Strategy number 2 is called name it. Really student driven. So you don't have to do this ahead of time as a teacher. Remember, I told you this is no prep for you, but you can have your students each choose, maybe their own word, or each student chooses a word. No word can be taken twice. You have to kind of figure out how you want your students to do that. And then take, I'm picturing like index cards, right? Different word on each index card that your students do. They tape the word to the back of another student. And then students, again, set a timer. I'm a big fan of timers because however much time you have in class, if you've got 4 minutes, if you've got 12 minutes, you can set it to whatever you need. Have students walk around and they can only ask yes or no questions about the word on their back. Now, they don't know what word is on their back because the word they wrote down got put on somebody else's back, right? They don't know what word is on their back. And so they're trying to figure it out, but they can only ask yes or no questions. Is it a verb? Is it something positive or is it something negative? I don't know. That's not a yes or no question. Change the way you're asking the question. Oh yeah, okay. So they have to think and get really good and strategic in just asking good questions, right? It's important to, I think, model this strategy. Maybe you and a couple student volunteers in front of the class kind of model it, because they need to be able to think strategically about what questions they ask in order to get the information that's going to be helpful to them, right? they've got to kind of practice that and hear what good quality questions are. Like, well, if I ask a question this way, is that going to give me any helpful information in figuring out what word is on my back? No. So, but if I rephrase it and ask it this way, will that give me better information? Yes. And so it's definitely higher level thinking, critical thinking. It's really fun. Students do get into it. So that's the name it strategy. And this is something that can be repeated all throughout the year. This is also a strategy that works really well if you want to just focus in on like the most recent 10 words or the most recent like 20 words, maybe this week's words and last week's words. So you don't have to have, 50 or 100 words to do this. It actually works better if you have a little bit smaller container of a word bank to choose from. If the so-called word bank is too big, if you tell your students any word from the entire school year and you have 100 words, for students who like they'll spend a lot of time making guesses that are it's just too big of a concept. So it really works better if you have like maybe 10 or 20 words and students as a class all agree, okay, this is where our words came from. So they can kind of, niche down and think a little bit more about what words they're doing. So that is the name it strategy. That's a really fun one to do. Do that one tomorrow. Okay, silly sentences, more of a creative writing challenge. So students, they can do this with a partner, they can do this in small groups, but they're challenged to create a silly sentence with as many vocabulary terms in it as possible. Now, it is okay to be silly, but the sentence has to make sense. And so you're thinking, okay, Laura, wait a second. If I tell my students to do that, they're just going to take like basically every adjective we've ever had and just put them into a sentence with a bunch of commas, right? But that won't work. And so think a little bit more about, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, or, he wrote Jabberwocky, the Jabberwocky poem, or, Dr. Seuss, or, some of these, Jack Prelutsky. Authors who use words in creative ways, maybe they even use a lot of nonsense words, and so they're silly, but they do still make sense. You're not just listing 30 nouns all in a row for these sentences. So this is something you have to kind of front load your students on, maybe show them an example and show them a non-example. Maybe you do one together, maybe you do a silly sentence together as a classroom so you can kind of, or as a class, you can kind of talk through like, well, this is a silly sentence and it makes sense. This is also a silly sentence over here, but this doesn't even make sense. You can be silly and still make sense. So it works really well with students in groups. It helps to give them a topic. And I put a couple of examples here. Maybe this group has the beach, this group has haunted house, this group has Candyland, whatever. Just give them a topic, because otherwise, if you set your timer for 10 minutes, they have 10 minutes to come up with a silly sentence, and let's see how many vocabulary words you can put into that sentence. I mean, they'll spend 8 of the 10 minutes just thinking of like, what should we write about? So it helps to just give them just a random topic like that first, so that they're kind of focused in on what to write about. But yeah, it helps them to kind of play with words. You will have very natural questions come up like, well, wait, can we make this a verb? You're right, that's a great question. Can that word, you're right, it's a noun right now, but can it become a verb? Could it? Those are such great discussion points and teachable moments to have in class. So if you use the silly sentences strategy and your students are doing this, you might want to be prepared to be up and to be moving around the room, because there will be questions. Okay, this is what we're thinking about doing, but if I add an ing here, I can keep going with my sentence, but I'm not sure if that's a real word. I mean, this is what we want our students doing, right? They don't get that engaged or excited about whether or not you can add an ing on a worksheet, but they will for this type of activity. So that's the silly sentences strategy. Again, I recommend using a timer. Use a timer for all of these. Okay, the personification strategy is number 4. This is one of my favorites. So each student becomes the word, okay? Each student becomes the word, which means that when they get up and they're moving around the classroom, nothing on them, they don't have the word written on them, they don't have a note card or anything on them that has the word, only they know what the word is. And so they get up, they move around, they interact with each other, they talk with each other, they ask each other questions, but they have to be the word as they communicate with other people. They have personified that word. Think of how deeply they have to understand the meaning and the context of the word that they've chosen in order to speak that way and act that way, even move that way, even just the gestures or the body language. You'll have some kids get really into it. And even your shy students will come out of the shell a little bit,